Village Council work session. We have two specific items to discuss in the work session, and then some discussion of other issues for the future. But first of all, I'd like to call on our head of Parks and Recreation and others who are here to talk to us about the Holly Arts Festival plans and regulations therefore. Would you all please come up and scatter yourselves among the table as you wish? And as we go forward, I'll ask each of you to identify. I think we can get at least three chairs there. And Mark, you're going to speak from the podium? Okay? Beth may have taken that. I want to make sure you've all got a microphone. And while Mark is coming back, starting on my left but from right of the table, could you please identify yourself by name and your association with business partners? Well, whomever else, the village, of course. Good to see you behind that.
Megan McDonald, Special Events.
Yes, Megan, thanks very much.
Katrin Franklin, Pinehurst Business Partners, Holly Arts and Crafts.
Thank you, Katrin. Susan? Susan Harrison. All right, thanks very much. And Susan, especially when you're speaking, make sure you get into that microphone because it loves you and it wants to hear your voice. Mark, do you want to lead us on this discussion, please?
Yeah, I'll just do a brief little intro to this. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion with events, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and trying to figure out what parameters may be in place for Holly Arts if it's able to go forward. As I emailed everyone, I did reach out to the health department for guidance from them. It was something we've been doing for our events that we're looking at trying to host. We're still waiting on a response from the director or his assistant at the health department. So as soon as we get that, we will send that to you. Governor Cooper did have an announcement this afternoon, and after looking at that, reading the report, that announcement as it related to entertainment venues and events is only for those that have a seating capacity of 10,000 or more. So that does not apply in our case to any of our village facilities to where that would allow for a 7% capacity of your seating. So from that standpoint, events are still covered by that gathering size limit outdoor, which is 50. Now, obviously, Katrin sent everybody kind of their plan for Holly Arts for us to talk about tonight. And I think they've done a good job of trying to separate out the booths as best they can to try to limit how many people we would have gathering. I think that's where our biggest challenge is going to be with this, if we get approval from the health department to say, yes, you can move forward with something like this. But one of the questions that we had for Katrin and Susan was, when you think about that 50-person gathering limit, how many vendors are in each booth? If you have 2 vendors per booth and you have 15 on the Village Green in Tufts Park, then that's 30 people right there, and you could only have 20 patrons or visitors trying to shop at that. So I think that's going to be our biggest challenge is if we look at these kind of different areas, quadrants, whatever you want to call it, of where they would be separating the booths, is how can we ensure that we don't exceed the gathering limit in those areas? Is that possible? Is there a way to manage the crowds, and who's going to do that? Who would staff it? I think that's the biggest issue here, is how we could overcome that. And as she mentioned in her email, kind of where that idea came from is the sports guidelines that you see in parks and facilities. So we could have 50 people on field 1, we could have 50 on field 2, and 50 each on the 2 practice soccer fields. The groups themselves are socially distanced, and that allows you to have more people in that area. I don't know that there is enough space downtown to separate the village into enough quadrants to allow for, what I think everybody would hope is a meaningful and successful event, but that's something that we're here to talk about. So I'll let Katrin kind of go from here and go through some of their plans, and we'll go from there.
Cool, thank you. We completely agree. I think the biggest problem is finding a way.
Katrin, just keep the microphone right in front of you, if you could. Thank you.
Closer to you.
You can turn it up a little, turn the...
Closer.
Oh, yeah, don't turn it up.
There you go.
We agree. I think the biggest issue is finding a way to interpret the data that we have. So we went exclusively off of the 22 pages of Cooper's last discussion, And then the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services puts something out every like week or 2 weeks. It's the same thing you guys look at. I sent that to everyone in the email. We were going off of two things. So page 2, fall-related events are required to blah, 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 pumpkin patches, apple orchards, animal attractions. So this to me means large outdoor spaces where you cannot, there's no one in, one out. It's very free-flowing, whatever. Limit to 50% of stated fire capacity or 12 people per 1,000 square feet. You're gonna have to tell me how big the village of Pinehurst is. That's math I didn't look up. Just like Mark said with sporting events, it's 50 people. Specifically, sporting events is strange because Section 9 of, I didn't send this to you, but the last time Cooper spoke officially on September 4th, he put out 22 pages of what 2 point, whatever phase we were in.
5.
Judy?
2.5.
2.5 now, yeah, I don't remember if this was 2 or 2.5, you're right. Section 9 says that entertainment and sporting events in large venues, and that might be implying indoor, so outdoor would even be better. Says very clearly that 50 people are not the players or mascots or teammates or employees. Spectators and other attendees basically don't count. So there's a lot to interpret with the information, which makes it very difficult. Certainly with outdoor sporting events, like you guys have on the Cannon Park now, Cannon Field, there is certainly more than 50 people in each little quadrant and game because players, mascots, employees, and volunteers legally don't count. And then as long as it's 50 people, spectators, in family groups, so it's not 50 bodies, it's 50 family groups is what this says. So that doesn't really help us. But that's what we formulated the information around. In the email, some of the changes we've done, and I can read the email or we can just go through it very quickly. The first and foremost was we cut it in half. So we always have 200 vendors, we have 100. Susan has the same map that we've used for years and years and years, and we tried to figure out the best way to do it. Do we make a smaller event? Long story short, we found a way. We were just going to keep the exact same map and block out every other space. And that way, every single tent is exactly 10 feet from every single tent. That's done. North Carolina regulations require us to have things like this Know Your W sign at every single booth. We're going to have that. It requires us, well, it doesn't require us. We thought it was a fun accountability move. On here verbatim are the symptoms of COVID. We're going to ask every single vendor to sign and date. This is saying that they're aware of what the symptoms are. They've come to this event knowing that they don't have it. This does have to be taped, at every single booth, basically. We also have to require masks. We're aware of that. We have to require hand sanitizer at every single station. We know that. These are things that we're asking them to do. We have drafted an email. They always get an email a few days before the event that says, these are the requirements, this is where you park, this is how you help us out. This is elongated by a page. None of you have that in front of you, but I do have a copy tonight. It explains that they have to wear masks and why it's really important that this is safe but lucrative for everyone. They have to bring hand sanitizer. They have to they're put in charge of sort of managing their own space, and I think they're all more than willing to do that in many cases. This is really the first month, September's the first month, that events across the state have opened up. We can go on Facebook together, we can go on Visit NC together, and we can see the dozens of events that are happening now, officially outdoor, and into the hundreds. So it's certainly, including, you've got one at the harness track tomorrow. So things are definitely moving, and I think people are pivoting and trying to find a way to make this work for everyone. I know I'm all over the place. So enhanced signage, we have to have this sign everywhere. Kid zone and kids crafting areas have been completely eliminated. So the other big problem was the Village Green, because we used to do kids crafts there. Those are just going to be regular vendor booths. I think we have to be very careful about what our mission statement with this is. And I know our goal with this is many of our brick and mortar businesses lost all revenue for 40 days, and our restaurants are still at half-mast. Some are seating outside. I know 6 tables outside are a game changer. You guys helped us make that decision a few months ago, but we're still operating at 50% in many ways. So I think having this event in some way is necessary for the community. And I thought it was pretty coy that the business survey that listed earlier, when the businesses were asked, what's the most meaningful event that happens to you every single year, it was the Holly Festival. So that was perfect for me. I was like, oh, that's wonderful, because that's exactly why we work all year long for free to do this. No kids zone, no kids crafts. We legally don't have to do this, but we did eliminate all food trucks. We were trying to think of problem areas. We don't really want people gathering, so no picnic tables, please, don't put them out for me. We don't want people walking and eating and touching and walking and eating and touching. We don't want any of that, so there's no food trucks, although they're perfectly legal, and there's plenty of events happening in our county today, tomorrow, and this weekend that are food truck festivals, including the pilot is putting on, so far, they're at about a 1,500-person outdoor event, food truck rodeo in Vass. So it's definitely happening. I think people are just being careful about how we're doing it. Let me see. Something to answer, Mark, that this is part of the open discussion, is we sort of figured out Shorley Cooper doesn't mean 50 people in the entire village center. So we have to find a way to compartmentalize this and figure out how this works. We've broken up Market Square into 2 sides and Chinkapin Road into 2 sides, et cetera. Have sort of managed doing the math of if each booth has 2 people, and then there's 2 people shopping at each booth. I feel like we're close to the 50. Again, I was going off the guidelines of the people vending, the vendors and the employees don't count, because that's what Cooper said. So that's what I was going off of that. I know we have to have hand washing stations and hand sanitizing stations with the porta potties. That's easy. Requiring face masks, easy. Something that I've wanted to change for a really long time, and COVID is going to be a blessing in disguise. The gravel lot is now officially this year for patrons only. We are 100% without a doubt requiring vendors to come into the village, unload, get organized, and then have to park off-site. You guys let us use your parking spaces here. We pay Kirk Tours Limousine to run shuttles back and forth for free. There's no excuses why they can't use those. Kirk Tours has worked with us on this plan. Masks are required. They know their legal requirements. They are allowed to have 6 strangers in a shuttle at a time, or 14 people in a family group. So they've got all their licenses and everything organized. They know exactly what they're doing. I think I'm going to need help this year with managing that gravel parking lot. So I'd like to purchase 2 extra police officers from your off-duty solutions. That'll be easier. Even though we're doing half as many people, I think I'd maybe feel better with 2 or 4 police officers walking around, answering questions, suggesting masks, whatever. I think that's all I have for now. Kind of open discussion. The issues we have, Judy Davis sent me an email, and it's the same as Mark's concerns. It's really finding a way to police the number of bodies in each section, and I think that is the million-dollar question. And do we have that concern? If we have the entirety of the village broken down, and we know that instead of 200 vendors, we have 100 vendors, and everything is already 10 feet apart, what are the concerns?
No. Well, to me, I mean, this is not the only big issue in it, but it's just how this numbers thing is managed. That's kind of what I pick out from here. There are other questions and things I'm sure we in the council want to know a little bit more about, but how are these other areas, and this is a question for everybody, how are they solving this issue of numbers under the governor's orders? And that could change next week, it might not.
Right.
But, decisions have to be made, and you've got people to follow up with or cancel or not, and we do too, I'm sure. But how are these numbers being dealt with? Because they're going to be more than 50 people, unless it's segmented by street, and that sort of thing. I don't know how that's being done. Do we have any background on that? Anybody experienced anything? You pointed out today, Judy, some other places that are having these events. Ask the question.
And some people are using reservations, and this was our topic playing golf yesterday. How could we have the Holly Arts Festival? And so one person suggested reservations and restricting times. You get a reservation for 9 to 11 or something like that. And you get a color-coded tag. And you can only be there, and we go through and we get rid of people that have a pink tag when blue tags are due, or something like that. But I think that, and if we could have one-way paths, like go down Market Street, come back up Chinquapin, go over to the Tufts Green. I mean, almost a little bit like the wine walk. When that's set up, you start at 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, going to place. And kind of creating a path so that you have some organization to it rather than random. But I mean, and you're going to have random still because it's just the nature of the thing. But I mean, on any given Saturday, how many people are on Market Street? How many people are on Chinquapin?
Right, yes, you asked that question in an email to me. Let's estimate the number of people in the village on a busy weekend, like Labor Day weekend or something.
Hear you.
Yes, the question is, let's just think about the village in general. How many people are in the village in general on a busy weekend in a capacity that isn't managed at all? It's just the village, people are open, they're shopping, they're eating outside, they're sitting outside, whatever. I can't speak to that, but I know that when you asked me that question, I was like, well, okay, on any given Saturday, I know I see at least 150 people.
In your shop?
In my shop, I see at least, and these are individual people.
Right.
And a quarter of them are buying, so I was taking like transactions and then family groups and whatever. And so that's just a weekend. And that's not managed at all. That's just flow traffic, and people are sort of managing themselves. People are wearing masks, they're being careful of each other. And then again, of course, I might be open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. So I'm talking about a very long period
Longer
of
day.
time.
I mean, at the deli on Labor Day weekend Saturday, there was a line.
Right,
You
right,
know?
right. So there's certainly more than 50 people in the village all the time. And I think the only thing I could think to do was eliminate the gathering areas. So booths are farther apart, we're not doing the food, we're not doing picnic tables. I could certainly, if I'm willing to already pay to have 6 off-duty police officers, it's not out of the question to do more of sort of like a serpentine that you're talking about. Can there be one area where people come in, they're allowed to take their time, maybe instead of time restraints, because that's sort of half the fun of this type of event is to shop and talk, and you're like, well, I want to go back and see this other thing. I'm sure you noticed, I never really mentioned this, but we sort of changed the name this year to Holly Arts Marketplace. It's not really a festival this year. There's no food trucks, there's no kids' crafts, there's no balloon animal, there's no stilt guy. This is not really a festival. It's really our intent to give Pinehurst the boost that it lost for 40 days. So shopping is still very important to me, and I want people to feel comfortable to take a long time shopping, but we could certainly have one entry point, and then we already rent the barricades from you and sort of have them circle around. I don't know. The bigger question of how are other events doing it, they're not. They're not managing the number of people. It's outdoor, everyone is 10 feet apart, there's hand washing stations.
Where is that? Where's an event?
I would say, so Vass has one on Saturday.
I said one on Saturday.
If you go to.
I couldn't find one. I was at the,
Totally.
I went to the Council of Government. I asked the question, I think Jane was on. I said, does anybody know of an event that has occurred?
So many,
No
and
one can
maybe
tell
just
me one.
because I'm on Facebook all the time for my own store, dozens.
That's what we need is
Yeah.
names of events that occurred in my,
Got it. I'll send you a list, fairsandfestivals.nc.com. These are everything that is happening as of tomorrow. Mount Airy Fall Festival, North Carolina Fall Expo, Asheville Quilt Show.
ones in the Sway.
The Sway is the Vass one. You got it. That is called Vasstoberfest? It's like a food truck, something in Vass.
Food trucks are not, there's nothing against the food truck by the governor.
100%.
So, I mean, there's nothing preventing you from
Right.
truck out there. So, I mean,
Right.
I really,
I think part of the food truck issue
I did
was
that
was to
for
prevent people
restaurants.
from lining up, and on one hand, but also
well, they put lines down. and make
given
people-
our, but giving our restaurants the opportunity to meet those needs rather than the other, especially in a cut
Even
down
I
year.
think you can't feed that many people at the restaurants we have. You know, you just end up with hungry people.
Right.
But I guess, I think it's apples and oranges, because I agree with you about like the quantity of people you see and the quantity, but this is an event, and that's just people free will walking downtown. So you're comparing apples to oranges. I would say the concern, listen, I don't know how the governor thinks, is the vendors coming in from out of town, not our residents, not your businesses being in the streets.
I would say they're
I
mostly
think
local
that
this
is
year.
kind of like, how does all that occur? These people, you're creating a gathering, and it feels like the 100 vendors already breaks the 50-person rule, you know, already, like, before you get a customer. And, but I could tell you, I'm committed to having something.
Right.
I
We
just
gotta
don't know
figure
what
it
it
out.
is and what it looks like. And so I'm 200%, the show must go on, but what is the show? And, but I don't know if your analogy towards regular traffic to downtown, because all of a sudden, one party's responsible for the gathering. Now, you understand, whereas random people walking in and out. So I think that's a little, do you see the differentiation?
Kevin, what if we looked at it on a stall-by-stall basis and said, okay, there can't be more than, throw out a number, 5 people in front of a stall at any given time.
Right.
And if nobody can come to that stall until somebody else moves away. Now, that's the way they do it at the ABC store.
Yes.
I'm just going to say.
Power would take.
So,
Yes.
well, it's not a stall, but, you know.
Yeah.
But something like that, so that you don't have the congregation, over-congregation
Right.
in one place, that I think is what everybody's trying to avoid. I also feel it's all fine and large to say you can't have more than 50 people, but 50 people in what area? 50
This
people in
is
my
the question.
backyard? 50 people in the entire village? I mean, it doesn't, and I hear what you're saying about on any given weekday or weekend day, there's going to be just enough people milling around in the village center
That broke the 50.
who are not affiliated with each other.
I could attest to
But
her
you have the
number.
same numbers. So,
Number's right, because
So-
that's my number, too.
so I wonder if we controlled the people at each booth, those little congregation areas, if that would get us past.
So
and I
where
think
are the
that's
people
easy.
that are waiting to get into the booth going to congregate?
And
who's going to manage?
Well,
who's
if
going to
we
manage
have-
the 100 booths?
If we have, so ordinarily, the Holly Arts Fair draws 4,000 people,
We've never
and
had
that's with
counts for-
200 booths. So let's say there's only going to be 100 booths, maybe we're talking about 2,000 people total.
And I think even less.
2,000
Maybe
people.
5,000.
If we divide
4,000.
them up and with reservations, as Judy suggested, and if we have, what, 4 2-hour intervals or something
Not
over
to-
the day,
you know,
then you go from 2,000 down to, quickly, help me divide by 4, 500 people?
Catherine, what was the reference you gave earlier about a certain number of people in 1,000 square feet or 10,000? What was that?
12 people per 1,000 square feet was in the DHH.
Right.
Is that an indoor requirement? What is that? It's a
Outdoor.
outdoor, 12 people per 1,000 square feet.
You're going to have to tell me
number.
how big the village is.
We can do that.
Yeah, I know. You're going to have to tell
Calculate
me.
that. I mean, that might give us a good start point for what
Yep.
is.
Yeah, and
how do you-
I wasn't finished answering the question, and I wanted to know of those 100 vendors,
Mm-hmm.
who are out-of-town vendors and who are local vendors?
I think mostly local. I think we have
'cause what
certainly.
I'm trying to
We
say-
can make a list for you, we just don't have it prepared
I
tonight.
think that's
Most people that are
important when you're-
traveling are not traveling. They're like, meh.
Hugely important here. If that was you, there's no problem, you going outside and extending your shop outside. In my opinion, it's the wiggle room in this. It's safer. You have literally increased the safety
Right.
of shopping in your store. So
By
if those
expanding
are, if
outdoor.
those are 50 vendors that exist in the village,
Well, there aren't 50
I think
businesses
the
in the
answer,
village.
from a regulatory standpoint, I think the answer is this 12 people for
It
1,000
might
square
be.
feet. That is a lot of people in downtown Pinehurst.
do you know the number at the top of your, guess? Not exact, we're not going to hold you to it. Give us some.
That's the benchmark I was sort of
There are
looking for.
bunches and bunches of 1,000-foot, square foot spaces in downtown Pinehurst,
And if you-
outside. I mean, they're just gobs of them.
If you think of Tufts Park, it's roughly 6 to 7 acres. So, 40, what is it,
No,
42?
No,
not
no,
Tufts
no,
Park.
not Tufts
I mean, you-
Park.
No.
not-
Well,
you're thinking of the
I'm
whole
just
Village
giving
Green.
you a visualization of how big that
How many
space
square
is.
feet is that?
No, that's not 6 acres.
An acre is 43,000 square feet.
Right.
Yeah. 3,000.
And Tufts Park, that's just the grassy area, right?
No, that's encompassing everything, where the library sits, where
Yeah.
Village Chapel, all of that
That-
Yeah,
area.
well,
It's 7 acres.
that's
yeah.
too, yeah, so now,
That
so we
is
might
the
have an
wiggle
acre of green space there, maybe.
Yeah, how
Less
big
than
is
that, but-
the green where the
But I mean, with
farmers
all the
market
roads
is?
downtown and the sidewalks, there's
Yeah.
a lot of open space down there. We
I
could,
agree. Yeah, and if it's segmented at all,
Yeah.
that even gets to the other rule of thumb there that.
actually, if you think
do
about
that.
it, 1,000 square feet, think about an apartment that's
10 by
1,000 square
10.
feet, you know?
It's bigger than most of the
Wow,
apartments in the
Pinehurst,
green over here.
This limitation allows you to cram 12 people into something that size. That's actually pretty liberal.
This is room.
So that must be the sort of idea that others have had who are putting on these festivals. They must be looking at some statistic like that.
Yeah.
And it seems to be working in these other places.
No, it doesn't. It says to include retail, right? So
But how do we monitor it? I mean, I don't,
orchards, animal
Well-
attractions, and retail areas.
That is one business that's allowed to use its outdoor space.
No, pumpkin patch, well, yeah, but isn't Village of Pinehurst a business, I guess, you're
No,
right.
12 people for 1,000 square feet if there's not a fire code number. And ensure sufficient social distancing. I mean, that's just a,
Yeah, this is like something to hang your hat on, though, you're right. I mean,
Right. So
all
that's
I
what
was
we've
trying to
been-
do is try to dictate between out-of-town vendors and in-town vendors, because if you want to help your local businesses, I think that could be done.
Well, local businesses
Including-
have the opportunity to be members. They get booths of hat rent. They can have sidewalk space. So local vendors that want to participate are participating. Local pop-up vendors that want to participate are participating. So this is absolutely geared towards supporting brick and mortar in the village, and then other businesses in Moore County that maybe don't have a brick and mortar in the village, but they want to do a pop-up. I think that's absolutely what we're looking at. So that part's easy. But there's nothing in here about travel. Cooper hasn't said anything about they can only be from your area or from your county or whatever. But if people want to pop up, they already are. They already have rented spaces to be outside of their business.
I was
So
just
that's
trying-
already
I was
included.
trying to
That's
tell
in
you
there.
what separates this from a normal day with 150. To me, I'm just trying to understand why this has been restricted, and it's been restricted because of you're mixing parties together that weren't mixed together.
Right. They don't want gathering. This is all specifically about gathering, I feel like, and that's the,
You know, it's just, we're trying to look for the possible. I think that's.
Totally.
Judy and I were talking emails, that, you know, what is the possible? And have we heard anything from your email to the state?
Not yet, no.
That would be nice, especially if you're armed with that data on a 12 by 1,000 square feet. Does it apply to us?
And we can
That's
follow
what-
up with that question to them directly, too, so.
if it's in the DHH
It's in their, that's their data.
Right,
So
that's
why,
theirs.
you say Moore County might come up with something that's contrary to what DHHS says?
DHHS tells you to run all of your plans by the local health department for their
Okay.
guidance.
Got it. Okay.
So that is what we're trying to do when it comes to our events, and if there's any gray areas. And in Megan's conversation with Mr. Whitman, who's the director, he did indicate that there were many events that have applied for approval, and I believe only 2 were approved, and that was Farmers Day in Robbins and Antiques Fair in Cameron.
You have any idea how quickly they can, I mean, you guys are running out of time. And I'm concerned that I think we want this to happen.
Totally.
But I wish you could get some clarification from him. And my only concern is just the crowds. And we're cutting the vendors in half because of COVID. And if it's a nice day, you may have a whole lot of people.
Totally, right.
And my concern is just managing these people and, making just, do you have a plan for that? I'll have to tell you, my husband already got an email today from MOA saying that Holly Arts is on. So the word's out there that it's happening, so I don't know how
Yeah,
widespread.
it's always been, I mean, until we're down to the very last wire and I send out that email that says, just kidding, everyone's getting a check for their $100. I'm going to embrace this with you guys and have these conversations as things change. The proposal that I had for this a few months ago is completely different than what we're looking at today, so.
So you're going down the path that it's going to happen until you find out.
It's much easier to prepare that way. That way we get,
Okay.
everyone's in their lane and they know what their job is and they know what their requirements are until we email them and say,
Okay, so you're waiting on the health department, and I still am trying to figure out how we're going to manage the crowds if you get more than 12 people per 1,000 square feet, or,
I think you said earlier, a typical festival brings about 4,000 people?
we've estimated, there's
Do
no.
you- do you have any kind of sense for what the max crowd at any given time is?
Right, that's just counting, it's unofficial, but Marva Kirk, who's like the event planner extraordinaire, I've asked her one day, how many bodies do you think you saw? And she does concerts and all sorts of stuff, and she's like, I think this is like a 4,000 person event. And that's all day. That's from the,
That's-
people-
that's-
that's
yeah,
all
so-
from 10 to 4.
So I'm thinking about in terms of what's the worst case in terms of numbers that are there all at the same time? Is it
Right,
less than 4,000? I don't know
right.
what.
So I don't know, 500, all there at the exact same time. I don't know.
If you don't include the vendors?
So
Right.
I just did a
That's
quick
ideal.
measurement on GIS on my phone. And I would bet we have at least an acre of open space down there.
44,000 square feet.
Yeah, so that's 43 times 12 is getting pretty close to 500.
Okay,
Now, that would include vendors and everybody else, but
yes. And that number is taken off of our normal years when
some
things
of those
are
people are going to
slow.
be indoors at restaurants and, in other words, they're downtown, but they're taking off that count.
Right, they're not outside. I mean, they
Right.
might be at Cameron, they might be in Bumpin' Baby,
Shops, yeah.
they might,
On the 2 people the health department allowed, the Farmers Day, it got canceled anyway. They gave them a permit, and they still ended up canceling it.
but that was.
And then
that was
the other
much
one was
earlier.
Cameron what?
Antiques Fair in
And
Cameron.
that happened in the spring?
No, it was,
I couldn't find any record of it.
I don't think it occurred either. So the 2 that got
No.
permission, I don't
ended
think
up not being
occurred.
held.
Well, I
Just so
think
you
the social climate's definitely something to
Yeah.
consider, even if I feel with good faith, that knowing the information that I know, that I took, I wrote a plan that followed verbatim the way that I interpreted data the best of my ability with the help of Carla, who already works for the state for half of this stuff. But that doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do if this were in April, I would have canceled too. I think social climate was very volatile at the time. So even if they had organized everything and it was perfect, that doesn't mean that they have to do it. And just because they canceled it doesn't mean that it was a bad idea.
Carla was interesting to me. Carla's kind of protected class, selling food at the farmer's market.
Totally.
Did she tell you how that protected class applies to retail and crafts?
Totally. She and I
Could you explain
crafted
that to us?
verbatim, that's what the email is. She and I crafted this together. We took what she knows from, it doesn't have anything to do with food. And as you noted, we have actually eliminated food, and we don't even legally have to eliminate food, but we eliminated food just to protect gathering.
You're allowed to do food, though. It's protected.
Right, we're allowed to do food.
Yeah.
But we were trying to create something to present to the village where I can say every conceivable notion of this. I don't want people gathering or sitting or eating or making a mess. I want this to be about shopping. I want this to be about supporting the village, and I want this to be about supporting the restaurants, even if they wait an hour for a burger. That's what I want this to be about. We've missed an entire year of business.
So they say selling crafts is a protected class, like selling,
No, 100% not. Carla is in two groups. So one, the farmer's market's a protected class because it's food.
Right.
So it's completely different. But the regulations that the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services puts out about food looks like XYZ, and about retail and events looks like XYZ. And we took the most strict of both forms
So you-
and
you-
created this
you
package
created
for
it
you.
from a hybrid formula.
Right.
Okay. It makes sense, but it
And the
just-
retail one is more strict than food because food's a
Right.
protected class. So there's things that Carla can do that I can't do because this is crafts. And so we've gone off of the information that they gave for retail and outdoor events.
Did you ever think that I mean, I know you want to have the Holly Arts and, Harlot Marketplace, keep the Holly name for its, do you think it might saddle you a little bit? And this is going to be something different, and maybe it should be a different, you know what I'm trying to say? No? Okay, because I'm just,
No change in name, in other words, yeah.
No, I loved,
No.
I didn't mind at all changing from festival to marketplace. And I think that something Susan and I are both excited about is that, again, COVID may be a blessing in disguise, that we can sort of use this as a crux to regulate parking differently than we've wanted to in years past. And I've gotten some kickback from patrons, et cetera. So Holly Arts is about shopping, and that's what I really want it to be
Right.
about.
it's an outdoor market.
It's an
though.
outdoor
I'm just
market.
I'm trying to say, how do you match it up, the farmer's market? And Holly
I don't.
Outdoor
Well, you
Market.
can't. You
Yeah, I'm
can't.
not
I
comparing
think
it
it's
to a
the same.
farmer's market at all.
I am, because I'm trying to say that the farmer's market is a protected class, and that
Right.
the more you look like it, even though you're not it, you walk like a duck, talk like a duck, you're a duck. I mean, a Holly Outdoor Market. I mean, that's what this is. It's an
Right,
outdoor.
and that's what it's called, yep.
So marketplace works too, but I'm just trying to, that's something that's allowed, and something that sounds, I'm just trying to figure out how to get through this.
I think the plan you have has been devised in about the best way possible. I think you've thought of everything that could be done to make this a protected, successful event. I came back to the first question, which was, how do we manage the crowd? And how do we know that number?
Right.
And I think Jeff's onto the right idea, and I think to follow up on this a little bit and to kind of move this discussion along, I'm comfortable with the plan you have. I have a couple questions I'd like to ask, but maybe we need to try over the next couple of days or something to figure out what this 12 people for 1,000 square feet is, and if that's applicable to us. We don't know that right now. It's got to put some thought process to that, which can be done. My other question is this, and then Judy. You have 100 desired vendors, or spaces. How many of those are committed already?
100?
100 of them. And most of them are local, what we'd call local, because that's what you're trying to do. There'll be some from different places, right? So
Yeah.
your commitment in financial terms is what? What's at risk here financially? That all the money has to be returned, and are there expenses of business partners that wouldn't be reimbursed? What's
Oh,
the number,
true.
would you say?
I'd have to think about that. Yeah, we would refund, so usually we don't refund full refunds. When people cancel halfway through the year,
Yeah.
we keep an application fee.
Yeah.
This time, no questions asked, we just refund all of their money, so that would be 100 times 100. We'd be writing those checks out.
Business partners would
Maybe-
have, business partners has some money into this, which some of it's going to be at risk unless it all
Right.
gets canceled
Right.
ahead of time
I feel like it's
contract.
pretty nominal, and maybe that's not what you're looking for, but like 1,500 or less, because we'd be writing checks back for 1,000. We've already made signs and posters, we pay a graphic design artist, we bought tote bags. we
You've
pay
got some sunk
Susan.
costs.
So,
Some could be used at a future event, maybe, if it's
Yeah.
not this year. All right.
yeah, I
So
wouldn't,
it's
I
not
don't feel like
There's not a
it's-
lot of dollars at risk here, and if we
No.
kept moving this plan along and it got canceled for whatever reason in the next one day, 2
I'll
weeks,
be asking you to
3
do it
weeks,
in November.
you'd lose, business partners might lose $2,000 or
Sure.
$5,000. All right. And that's a risk
Thousand.
you're willing to take, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, Mark, what's the risk to the village here? Where is our financial commitment into this? What would we lose if we couldn't provide this, couldn't support this?
I don't know that the village financially would lose anything.
We don't have any-
The costs are borne by the business partners for the event. I think the opportunity to lose something is public trust, the risk of an outbreak from this event.
Well,
and the
that's another point,
perception
yeah.
from that.
Right,
But
right.
financially, I don't think that there is a loss to the village.
Right. And I'm going to suggest that, people who might normally come to the Holly Arts Festival, some of them may not this year because of COVID. That's their personal decision. That's understood. They're not going to
Absolutely.
be there. Others want to take that risk. But the risk to the village is something we need to be concerned with, and that's kind of where the focus is in my mind on whether we give the go-ahead or not. But to me, the go-ahead is really what's that, or largely determine on what that number is we need to try to manage, and still be in compliance somehow with the governor's general rules for all this sort of thing, which are still coming out, and we don't know October 2nd next
Yeah,
week what it'll be.
the next update may have a significant increase in the size of gatherings. We just don't know. And that
It's
could
likely,
impact what we're able
Or
to
do
do.
you-
I'm
or
going to say
nothing.
it's likely you're going to hear back from Mr. Whitman this week.
Yeah,
You should.
I will follow up with a phone call
Yeah.
tomorrow to either
And
him or Matt. so.
I wouldn't be surprised if they said no because this statute and that statute, and maybe they're looking at it differently from ourselves, and we'd need to understand that. But I just can't guess. I
I
wouldn't
think the
guess.
question of the 12 per 1,000 square feet is worth asking for sure.
Right. And Judy, you had a couple points here, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
In other words, tell us why it wouldn't apply in this situation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Catherine, you mentioned you have a plan, you have a layout, a
Yes.
design. If you haven't provided that to Mark or Megan, could you do that? And let us do the math and figure out what it means in terms of numbers. From a realistic standpoint, if in fact this 12 per 1,000 standard is appropriate.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's exactly. Judy?
my only other point was that you might end up having to scale back on the number of vendors. You know, So not 100.
That's a wonderful point. If we look at this map and it pushes us too close to the 50 or the 500 or whatever we come back with, then we've already cut back food, we've already cut back any non-selling vendors. We're historically known for sort of taking anyone who's involved in the community, so it's a lot of selling vendors, but also a lot of people that are just advertising, maybe the county's nonprofits and things like that. So we've already eradicated them from the list. If my mission statement is going to be really to support the village, brick and mortar restaurants and residences, and that's why I changed the name to Marketplace. If we need to shave off another category to get it down to 75, and then we're within our 500, and then it's not so much about managing the crowd, because the crowd, we know for sure, is already in the 12 per 1,000, totally fine, easy.
Yeah, yeah.
And you'll have some booths that are more interesting than others. I mean, the line for the fish lady on Wednesday afternoon is the longest line.
You got
Getting
it.
big, that's right. Catherine, how many of the committed vendors are shops in the core village that are putting something on the street in front of their store versus just having this store open or whatever they plan to do? Do they have to have something outside of their, that's your encouragement to do that, which I agree with, but are most of them doing that?
Most don't.
Do the-
Historically, this is such a stellar event that we bring the vendors to the village and the business. This is the one day a year we just get to unlock our door and have a great day.
Right.
So maybe only 10 of those businesses and restaurants are extensions. They've got their business and they've rented the booth in front of them.
Okay.
And then maybe 50% after that are local to Moore County, I would say, that like come every single year.
Yeah.
And then to Kevin's question, probably the remaining 40% or whatever is people from North Carolina. I don't know of anyone traveling outside of North Carolina this year. And usually we really get some South Carolina,
Right.
Georgia, Virginia vendors.
Right.
And this is probably the first time everyone that I can think of is North Carolina.
Well, I think this is, if it can be done safely and legally, I think it's something, especially due to this focus on our existing businesses, to help them, but not at a risk that we don't want to absorb, the medical risk, really. I don't think
Right.
the financial risk is very much.
I would go.
So I would say, let's, Jeff, can you kind of work on the number deal here. And that's really one of the key determining factors I think that we would want to hear. And go on from there.
I say we have something, and they make you tell, if they say you can't have it, you ask them what you can have. We got to ask.
Yes.
Instead of, can we have it? Okay, what can we do?
How can we modify this?
How can we
to-
make
Yeah.
them modify it?
Yep.
And, you know, try to not take no for, you know, I'll take no for an answer if they're public safety. But I'm just talking about, if it's going to take 30 booths, I would still do it. And and I think this financial question was a good one, because you're saying, you know, you got to lose 2,000, but this is a fundraiser too. So you lose, there's a bigger gap loss because you use it as a fundraiser. I don't know. There's got to be some way that we could help as a village, but I say something should occur. It might be small. Instead of either big or go home. I'd rather not think of the latter,
Yep.
if that's possible. You know, let's just pare it down till we can do it.
Yep, I want whatever works. I came up with the best thing I could come up with these two documents. Never thought of contacting the county, so that's what you guys are here for. And go from there and see what we
And
can do.
I think your model, as Kevin's suggesting, can be shrunk down a little bit if it needs to be, depending on what the numbers are.
Yep.
It's set for 100, maybe it needs to be something less, maybe not. I don't think you want to go beyond 100, because it would get kind of beyond where we're trying to focus.
Right, oh, yeah.
So
Sounds big
let's move
number.
on to, I think this has been helpful, certainly to the council, and
Thank you,
I
guys.
hopefully to you, Catherine and
Have you
Megan.
prioritized
Susan.
your booths?
And-
Like, who's one, who's two, who's three, who's four? Because you might have to do that, you know? You know what I mean?
What do you mean?
If
No.
the decision comes into play that
Oh, yeah, then we'll come up with
you're gonna,
something.
you might have to start that ranking
Yeah,
pretty
we'll
soon.
come up with something.
Gonna happen, and I, for one, don't mind food trucks, because really, you want people happy. That's the biggest thing.
that's
You
a
want
tough
people
one.
happy when they go to these events, and it's not about, competition is not a bad thing,
Well,
so.
this year, they're just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah,
I was trying to take down the biggest risk possible, so.
All right, so we understand your plan. We've got a financial really a people component to figure out here.
Yep.
And that's where the time will be spent over the next few days. All right.
Well, thank
So,
you, guys.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you,
Megan, good to
Catherine,
see you behind the
and
mask,
Mark
in
and
front of the
Megan.
mask.
you have a
Thank you, Mark.
meeting with the Triangle Council of Governments tomorrow night,
Okay.
and I'm asking this question.
That's a good
Who has
point.
had an event?
How are
Where
they
has
doing it?
been?
Yeah.
And if it's been approved, how? and
Yeah,
why?
so I
Yep.
am going to ask, I don't know if I'll get an answer, but it's for the whole triangle area. So, you know, I thought it'd be important to see if anybody's had it and what were the rules in place.
Right, because if it was approved, then we want to know what they did, and we'll just emulate that.
And we don't have to wait on Carthage call, we could drive to Carthage.
You'll have to wait on that.
Let's move on to item number 3.
Thanks, Mark.
Yes.
Thanks, Megan.
Hate to be a nuisance, but let's move on to the nuisance.
Okay, yeah.
Number 3, Jeff?
So I see Beth has called that document up. I guess I think at this point, we're focusing on the penalty language. Is that right? I mean, are everybody happy with everything else?
She's going to bring it up here? Okay.
I'm more concerned about execution. All my questions were on how it's going to be executed.
Yeah.
Paul really helped me a little bit. He knows what he's getting into,
He thinks he can do it.
and I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
And that was my concern. But I agreed with all three of the intents of all this. I have no problem with it. I'm worried about the unintended consequences. And
Yeah.
I see some serious I see some birthday parties and weddings being impacted.
Now, you're right, so you are talking about the nuisance ordinance. You moved on from the Hollyards. I wasn't sure for a minute, because your comments could have been taken 2 ways.
Oh, yeah,
Hollyards
yeah.
or nuisance. So anyway, go ahead, Jeff. Well done, Kevin.
I thought we were on the nuisance ordinance.
Yeah, no, you're good. Let's go.
So what I've done with this draft, with regard to penalties, is I've retained the provision that not only could we penalize, you want to call them the perpetrator, the folks that are committing the acts that are causing the noise, but in situations where that is happening on a property that's, that belongs to somebody else and there's some contractual relationship associated with that, whether it's a long-term rental or a short-term rental, then we also have the ability to penalize the owner. And the motivation for that is to, or our motivation for that is to try to incentivize those owners to put appropriate language in whatever those legal instruments are, leases or, short-term rental documents or whatever, that help us to prevent these things from happening in the future. We won't be perfect in that regard, but that is the intent. It's about creating incentives for owners to improve contractual language. And you had some discussion back and forth earlier today about whether or not it's appropriate to not also provide for a criminal offense to those owners. I go either way. I kind of am of the mind that it may not make sense to have a criminal offense in either case, but I think the flexibility allows us some.
I heard that. That solved it for me.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't get them to pay up on the civil side, then you can follow through with the stick on the criminal side of things. Might have some opinions on that.
I was arguing equity and just in all things
Yeah.
more than I was anything else. Equal, no matter what.
May I ask, I sent Jeff a matrix after last time. I kind of have to get the policy in place before I can put statutory ordinance language around it. And Judy, maybe I'm back to where you and I both were last meeting, was if you have somebody, I think Jane's analogy, the turn on the record player, first time was the penalty, second time was the penalty, third time was the penalty. And this looks like it's got to be, the 24-month period thing, I don't get. If the guy turns up his record player too loud today and tomorrow and the next day, that to me, that's a first offense, a second offense, a third offense.
This would recognize that.
Within a 24-month period. Okay, so.
In other words, you're penalized for each successive offense until you exceed that 24-month period. And then,
You start all
the
over
oldest
again.
one drops off, but the other ones still count, until that
Like
next one comes outside of 24-month period.
Like speeding tickets.
Yeah, I mean, that was
Yeah.
hard for me to grasp. I guess
roll
that's
off.
lingo.
Yeah, with the point system and all that stuff.
It was very hard for me to grasp.
It's not that hard.
Okay, so then we've got, so escalate, start 100 at first infraction, escalate for each subsequent. So it can go up 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. Got it.
Up to the legal max of
Okay.
500.
Now, and then we
I don't
decided.
think we're ever going to see that happen, but it puts the provision in place that if you have the egregious offender out there that just won't listen, it
Okay.
does escalate on them.
Now, and I'd asked you about, what about the property owner? And you had said, the real estate agent or the rental agent. And we decided we're just going to hold the owner responsible and then let the owner go back to the rental agent. So the rental agent will not have no fines, no penalty, no nothing. It's just the
Owner
person.
has the leverage on him.
Right.
I mean, he's not a financial player. I mean, yes, he does get a commission, but he doesn't own the property.
Yeah.
He's not the person renting the property.
Did ask that any form, it be noted who the rental agent is. It'd be data. It'd be interesting to have.
I think we would have to do that after the fact. I'm not going to ask the police part.
I'm not,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't want you to make the police department do anything more, but I just tell you,
We can
data
collect data
is
on where
king.
offenses occurred and then figure out.
Be interesting
know
if
what
it was the
we get from
same
it, but-
rental agent.
And I
each
think,
time.
we're going to know the big offenders.
Now, we've got in B, we changed firm, and that needs to be changed to firm or business entity. You did earlier, but I don't think it got changed there. Because I think when I changed it, I only changed it in these early sections, not in the penalty
Make
section.
that change, yeah, to make that consistent in the penalty language.
Yeah, so firm
Yeah.
or business entity.
Are you in
And-
B? Are you in B? or-
No, 92.17. Now
9217, but
In B, 9217B.
Glenn had said today that the decibel level we had was not sufficient, and then he came back and said it was sufficient.
Thought it was too low.
Yeah.
Well, that's because Jeff convinced him.
Well, I mean, I think he was, again, he was thinking about this from the standpoint of measuring on the offending property, not on the receiving property.
Okay, okay.
Now, having said that, I'm a little nervous about this too, but, you know, we went out and we said, what are other communities doing out there and what's it based on? And, you know, it eventually led back to, you know, a lot of these communities are centered on the standards or the recommendation that the World Health Organization made with regard to what to call a noise nuisance. I think there's a possibility that we're going to get down the road on this, and we're going to recognize that we need to adjust that either up or down. But you have that power, you can do it. I think we have to start, you know, when you're trying to draw this hard scientific line somewhere, you have to build some experience before you're really going to know how
And we
appropriate
could
it
change
is.
that with a text amendment, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's
real
right.
easy, real easy. Okay.
We changed the 15 days to 30 days in the other part of the nuisance ordinance, so we can tweak
Yeah.
later.
Well, you know, if Glenn's happy with it, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I needed to hear that, because I was worried that we're heading them down a rabbit hole.
So if everybody's happy with this, then I'll make the change to the language in 17C to recognize that it's not just, I think I just said owner, it just says legal owner.
Legal owner.
Does any firm or corporation,
Change to firm and corporation.
any
to business
person,
entity.
firm, or corporation?
Does it matter? I mean, if you just say the legal owner,
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
fine.
I
doesn't
think
it?
legal owner works.
Oh, and C?
Covers everything.
is that what you're referring to?
No, I was referring to right here in B.
B.
Not limiting it to
Oh, yeah,
individual
okay,
or
yeah.
anything.
That's the infractor that could not be the owner, though? This is where I'm gonna get confused on how it's applied.
Yeah, we can do it there, yeah.
So just that one, and then C, C.
We got to approve this
I'll
tonight.
make that change, and then we'll bring it back to you in ordinance format at the next meeting for
Yeah.
approval.
Let's get it approved. Yeah, I think it's, you've worked hard on that, Jeff. Thanks a lot. Mike, thanks for your input. I know you've had some too. Certainly the council members. Jane, did that answer all of your questions though, too?
Yeah, I'm not sure, what is it that you want to change, Lydia?
Oh, just, in, 9217B, up above. to
Doesn't
make
say
up-
owner.
Yeah.
Any person, firm, corporation,
I'm just
or
saying any-
corporation, in the
First line.
offense definition language further up in the ordinance,
Yep.
He wants owner in there.
Lydia asked us to change corporation to a more legally appropriate
Well,
set
I
of
took out firm or corporation, just put a person or business entity.
defined business entity to be,
Partnership, LLC, small business, all that kind of stuff, that's all. I changed it up above just to make it consistent. And
That's
but didn't
that's a
put-
Mike question. I mean,
It's okay. And we define business
I
entity.
think we're just trying
seems
to
to
say
me to be
anybody.
more
Consistent,
consistent and complete,
Yes,
complete,
thank you.
yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
So I,
that's fine.
I particularly like Glenn's suggestion to, whenever this becomes effective,
Yeah.
that you have a lead
A
time.
phasing
before
in
you-
period.
Yeah, you phase it in before you start,
I was short,
giving
60
people
days.
citations. I thought
Agreed.
that was a great idea.
You said 60, right?
Yeah, I don't, 30 or 60
Pretty
days. yeah,
short.
something.
days.
Okay.
Here's my thought on that, my request. I hope then we'll be able to approve this at October 13th is our next meeting.
Right.
All right. So in my view, we'd run the grace period to December the 1st.
Okay.
And after that, it's effective on December the 1st from there on.
Yeah.
That's less than 60.
Maybe we put that in
So that's less than.
the ordinance language, effective date of,
That would give us a couple of NAC meetings, a couple of council meetings to be talking about this and saying it's going to affect.
yeah.
I think you should make it effective New Year's Eve.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
We'd be accused,
Explain the
be
lack.
accused on that. We wouldn't want to do that. We'd be accused on that.
Mike, you're okay, obviously, with all this, right? Can you explain the lack of officer's discretion part? You said there'd be no officer discretion.
Well,
Can you
yeah,
explain that to
There's
me?
always discretion.
Okay, well,
My,
I need to.
my, I don't know if I interpreted Glenn's comment correctly or not in retrospect, but I think what he was referring to was the old ordinance language was
Didn't help him.
100% discretion. There was no
Okay.
clear definition of what
I was
is and isn't
hoping
an
you'd say that.
offense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm good after hearing that.
I think he
because
was
you gotta give
advocating
officers-
for a removal of all of that discretion, or
a
some,
raid on a wedding.
most of it.
Without some discretion from the officer.
Okay. Any other comments? I think we've got it done.
Yep.
Thank you, Jeff,
Okay.
on this. Looking at the other work session items, is there any other business you want to raise tonight before we
No.
talk a little bit about future business? Anything from you, Judy?
No,
Nothing, really? Nothing in the future?
I want to move on.
I knew. Jane?
No.
Lydia? All right. Yeah, we do have a list, and,
Forget it.
but,
That's not happening.
but
Oh, Mike, have you been here since 4:30?
I think on that list for future work sessions, we've got to start getting into these PDO changes and things we see coming along from Floyd Way and the USGA. We got to start thinking about that. And
Extending
how we're going
ETJ.
to, how we're going to have to look
That
at.
might occur in a minute.
Yeah, it might. So that's what I'd put on the to-do list, is the PDA-related issues coming from the USGA, Floyd
PDO.
Way, and things we've been learning here. And I think we found a couple of good volunteers tonight on the issues related to water and some expertise that's in the community. All right.
A rare compliment.
Yeah, well done.
From a former mayor.
From a former mayor, yeah. Okay, at this point, we've come to item number 6. Is there a motion to recess the work session and enter a closed session?
I move to recess the work session and enter into a closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-318.11, little a, little 5 in parens and little I in parens, to establish or to instruct the public body staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body in negotiating, 1, the price and other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease, and pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11, little a in parens, 4 in parens, to discuss economic development matters involving a prospective new business or the expansion of an existing business or industry.
There is a motion by Judy Davis. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Lydia Bosch. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. We're now in a closed session.
Get everything off
Need
first.
to